Daniel Carson rose at 4:45 a.m. sharp, just as he had every day since 1983. The muscle memory of 22 years in the Marine Corps never faded, not even after retirement. He moved with methodical precision. Boots laced tight, uniform collar adjusted just so, medals polished even if no one would see them. Rocky, his service dog and constant companion, stirred from his bed beside the door. At 62, Daniel's body was slower, his gait uneven from shrapnel lodged near his hip since Hellman Province. But his mind remained clear, razor-sharp when it needed to be. The world he once fought for now barely looked back. But Daniel didn't expect gratitude. What he had, he earned, day by day, scar by scar. The town of Fairwater had changed. Once a proud, working-class coastal city, now it was all boutique cafes and polished storefronts that rarely welcomed men who limped or dogs who wore combat vests. He didn't belong, not really. But the Blue Water Grill on Main still served decent coffee, and Daniel clung to routine like a soldier to his rifle. Rocky, a Belgian Malinois with steel-colored eyes and a graying muzzle, walked perfectly at Daniel's side, never pulling, never straying. He wasn't just trained, he was bonded. The dog could sense the tremors in Daniel's hands before they started, the tightness in his throat before a memory snapped loose. Rocky had stood between Daniel and gunfire, and now, in peacetime, he stood between Daniel and isolation. As they approached the restaurant, Daniel adjusted the photo in his wallet. It showed a younger version of himself on a stretcher, bloodied. Rocky, lean and fierce, stood over him. The dog had aged. So had Daniel. But the mission had never changed. Stay alert. Stay alive. Watch each other's six. He opened the restaurant door, not knowing this would be the morning everything changed. The bell above the Blue Water Grill door jingled as Daniel entered, Rocky padding quietly at his side. The diner was half full, humming with soft conversation and clinking silverware. He chose his usual table near the window, close enough to observe, far enough to avoid attention. Rocky eased under the table without a sound. A young waitress brought water and a coffee pot, her smile polite but distant. When she saw Rocky, her eyes lingered a moment too long before she turned and disappeared into the back. Daniel knew the signs. 5 minutes later, a man in a white dress shirt and a crooked name tag, assistant manager Brent, strode toward him with a practiced scowl. His voice was sharp, designed to draw attention. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me. We don't allow animals in the dining area. Health code violations." "He's a service dog," Daniel said calmly, reaching for the laminated card he always carried. Brent barely glanced at it. "Doesn't matter. Other customers are uncomfortable." Across the room, a woman in designer sunglasses nodded dramatically, sipping her mimosa. "He's just a dog," she muttered loudly. "Military or not." Rocky didn't move. Neither did Daniel. But the quiet in the room grew thick. "This dog has saved lives," Daniel said, voice low but steady. "He pulled me out of a burning Humvee in 2006. He has more confirmed saves than most medics." Brent shrugged. "Not my problem. You and the dog need to go." Daniel stood slowly, keeping his composure as the tension in the room crackled. He nodded once, then turned. Rocky rose with him, tail down but movements measured. The door swung shut behind them, leaving silence in their wake. Outside, Daniel crossed the street and sat on a worn park bench. The fall wind was biting. He unwrapped a sandwich he'd packed earlier, split it in half, and handed Rocky the bigger piece. "Wasn't the first time," he murmured. "Won't be the last." Teenagers passed by, laughing. One pointed. "Check it out. PTSD, Grandpa with his mutt." Daniel didn't flinch, but his jaw set hard. Rocky leaned into his leg, applying the calming pressure he'd been trained for. Daniel's breathing steadied. He pulled out the photo from his wallet again, staring at it. Then his phone buzzed. A notification from a social media platform he didn't even use. "You're trending." Confused, Daniel tapped the screen. A video had been uploaded, recorded by one of the teenagers. The caption read, "Crazy vet freaks out when asked to leave restaurant with his fake military dog." The video had thousands of views already. The comments were worse. Stolen valor much? Another old guy trying to play the hero. Bet the dogs just for attention. Daniel sat frozen, the wind ripping through his coat. Rocky whimpered softly, sensing his distress, his honor, his sacrifice, the silent weight he carried every day. It was all being reduced to a punchline. He turned the phone off, slipped it back into his pocket, and sat in silence as the world spun on without him. By the time the sky began to darken, Daniel had been sitting on that park bench for nearly an hour, unmoving. Rocky lay at his feet, chin resting across his paws, eyes flicking upward every time Daniel shifted. The sandwich wrapper fluttered away in the wind, unnoticed. Daniel stared at the street in front of him, but his mind was years away. Dust storms in Kandahar, blood in his mouth, the searing weight of a body, his own, dragged by jaws clamped tight to a vest strap. Rocky had never left his side, not once. Now, people pointed and sneered. They saw a dog, a mutt. They didn't know what Rocky had endured or what Daniel had given. A pair of footsteps approached, hesitant. "Excuse me, sir." Daniel turned. A young woman, barely 20, stood with a takeout bag in her hands. She wore the Blue Water Grill's apron, but her name tag was missing. "I saw what happened," she said softly, holding out the bag. "I thought maybe you didn't get to eat." Daniel hesitated. She wasn't looking at him with pity, only something that resembled apology. He accepted the bag slowly. Inside was a hot meal and a small slice of pie. Beneath it all, a folded napkin. When Daniel opened it, his hand stilled, written in shaky but determined handwriting. "My brother was in Delta. If someone treated him the way they treated you, I'd want someone to do something. Thank you for your service." No name, no phone number, just words. Daniel looked up, but the girl had already crossed the street and vanished through the restaurant door. He sat still for a moment longer, the warm weight of the food in his hands. Rocky nuzzled his knee, tail wagging once. That night, Daniel didn't sleep well. Memories flickered behind his eyelids. Fire, screaming, the rhythmic pounding of his own heart. But each time he woke, Rocky was there, pressed close to his side. By morning, Daniel had made a decision. He dressed in full uniform, pressed slacks, polished boots, campaign ribbons carefully aligned. He brushed Rocky, adjusted his vest, and checked his leash. Then he clipped the metal to the dog's collar, small, bronze, and dented at the edge. It was Rocky's commendation from Bravo Unit. Together, they walked, past the grocery store, past the gas station, past a bakery where people pretended not to recognize him. Word of the viral video had spread. He felt the whispers crawl across his skin like ants. But he kept walking, back to the Blue Water Grill. He didn't stop outside, didn't hesitate. He opened the door and stepped inside. It was busier than usual. The air buzzed with tension. This time, he didn't sit. This time, he walked straight to the front counter. The same manager, Brent, appeared from the kitchen, his mouth open in protest, but Daniel beat him to it. "You said you had a no-pet policy," he said, voice clear, calm. "Let's clarify that." He reached into his pocket, pulled out Rocky's documentation, and slammed it gently on the counter. Then he laid down Rocky's medal, followed by a framed photograph. Daniel and Rocky, surrounded by their unit, dirt-streaked and smiling after mission in Hellmand. Sergeant Rocky, Navy and Marine Corps medal, official service record attached. Brent stared, silent. A few diners stood, uncertain. "I didn't come for a meal," Daniel continued. "I came to remind you of something. Respect doesn't start with a badge or a title. It starts with decency." He turned, Rocky following closely. A phone chimed behind him. Then another. A TV mounted near the back flickered to life. Breaking news. Retired Marine humiliated in viral video. Full story unfolds. Daniel stopped cold. On the screen was the girl who had given him the takeout bag. She was outside the diner, speaking to a local reporter. "He's a hero," she said, eyes fierce. "That dog has done more for this country than any of us will ever understand." The video cut to a montage of Rocky in training, Daniel's medals, commendations, letters from Bravo Unit, all shared by someone who had quietly researched everything overnight and handed it to the press. A new video followed. Security footage from the restaurant. The real story. No edits. No snide captions. When Daniel turned back toward the dining room, people were on their feet. Applause erupted. Awkward at first, then building into something genuine. The door swung open. 5 men entered in synchronized motion, their uniforms unmistakable. Dress blues. Marines. At their front walked a man Daniel hadn't seen in over a decade. "McMillan," Daniel whispered. Captain James McMillan stepped forward and saluted. "Sergeant Carson," he said, voice thick. "Bravo Unit sends its regards." He turned to the crowd. "This man saved my life. Twice. Rocky here. He dragged 2 of our wounded back through enemy fire while Daniel covered us. He didn't ask for thanks. He never even told anyone." He stepped forward and placed a new medal in Daniel's hand. "This one's from all of us, and it doesn't go in a drawer." He pinned it to Rocky's vest. The restaurant was silent. Then someone began clapping again, louder this time. The woman in designer sunglasses from the day before stood up, tears in her eyes. She didn't speak. She just nodded, solemn. Outside, a camera crew recorded every second. Across the country, people were watching. But for Daniel and Rocky, the only thing that mattered was this. Someone had remembered, someone had cared, and someone had stood up, not for attention, for honor. The applause still echoed when the Marine captain extended his hand once more. Daniel took it firmly, jaw set with emotion he refused to show. Rocky remained still beside him, tail thudding once against the floor, eyes locked on Daniel like always. "Sir," Captain McMillan said, voice tight, "we're not here just to clap." Daniel blinked. Another Marine stepped forward and placed a sealed envelope into Daniel's hand. It bore the Department of Defense insignia. The room hushed again as he opened it. Inside was a formal letter from the Secretary of the Navy. By order of the United States Department of Defense, and upon review of service and conduct, Sergeant Daniel Carson is hereby commended for extraordinary valor. This citation, along with the Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal with Combat Distinguishing Device, is to be presented publicly at Arlington on Veterans Day. Daniel didn't move, didn't speak. Rocky nudged his leg once. The captain leaned in closer. "We fought to get this. You've been overlooked for too long. We won't let them forget again." Behind them, a stir broke out the front doors. 3 more figures entered. 2 men in Air Force blues and a woman in Army green. Each carried a folder. The woman stepped forward. "We're here on behalf of the Tri-Service Canine Commendation Board." Rocky's record was flagged by several active duty units after the video surfaced. "We've never had a dog hold cross-brand citations before." She knelt beside Rocky and gently affixed a ribbon around his vest. It shimmered with 3 colored stripes, red, white, and deep marine blue. Today, Rocky is formally recognized as a Tri-Service Commendation Canine, the first of his kind. People in the diner gasped. An older man in a navy hat began to weep quietly. A woman in her 30s clutched her daughter's hand as she whispered, "Look closely, baby. That's what a hero looks like." Then the doors burst open one more time. In walked Brent, the manager, now without his apron, his name tag gone. He moved quickly to Daniel and stopped short. "Mr. Carson," he stammered, I want to apologize. I didn't understand." "You don't want to understand," Daniel said calmly. "There's a difference." "I was wrong," Brent said, lowering his voice. "I've already handed in my resignation. The owner accepted it this morning." Daniel gave a slight nod. He didn't gloat. He didn't need to. Captain McMillan turned toward the crowd. "We've coordinated with Veteran Support Network leadership. As of today, Blue Water Grill is officially added to the Honor Site Registry. Every registered veteran in the state will know what happened here, what changed here." A low murmur swept the diner. Phones came out again, but this time to take pictures of Daniel, of Rocky, of the ribbons and medals now gleaming under fluorescent lights. Then came the moment that none of them expected. The waitress, The young woman who had given Daniel the takeout bag stood from behind the counter and stepped forward. Her eyes glistened. "I hope this doesn't overstep," she said quietly, then pulled out a black case. "This belonged to my brother. He was Delta, killed in Fallujah. He always wore this on ops." She opened the case to reveal a worn, frayed patch. "We fight together." She knelt beside Rocky and tucked it gently under his collar strap. He would have wanted it with a warrior. Daniel's throat tightened. The captain turned toward the press now gathered outside, beckoned them in. "Let the world see this. Let them see that service doesn't end when the war is over. Sometimes the greatest battles happen after the dust settles. And sometimes the hero is the one still standing, still fighting to be seen." Flashes fired as cameras snapped. Reporters asked questions, but no one dared interrupt the weight of what had just happened. Outside, a convoy of vehicles idled at the curb. A sleek black SUV door opened, and out stepped a man in a crisp federal suit. The emblem on his lapel matched Homeland Security. He approached Daniel directly. "Sergeant Carson, I'm with the Secretary's office. We'd like to formally extend you a role in the Veterans Advocacy Commission. We're developing a federal initiative to train service animals for returning combat veterans. We need your help." Daniel's jaw clenched. "I'm no politician." "You're not," the man said. "You're a soldier, and you've got something no politician ever will. The trust of men like Captain McMillan and a dog who never left your side." A small boy stepped out from the crowd, shy and hesitant. He wore a red Marine t-shirt 3 sizes too big. His father nudged him gently. The boy walked up to Daniel and Rocky, then raised his hand in a shaky salute. "Thank you for not giving up, sir." Daniel dropped to one knee, Rocky beside him, and returned the salute. Then he reached into his jacket and handed the boy something, a Bravo Unit Challenge coin. "Carry this until you earn your own," he said. "Then give it to someone else who needs to believe in what's possible." The boy's eyes lit up. His father choked back tears. In that moment, the weight of ridicule, the humiliation, the loneliness, it all broke apart. Not into nothing, but into something stronger. Purpose. The kind forged not by medals, but by meaning. The climax was never about revenge. It was about redemption. Public, irreversible, undeniable. The soldier the world mocked had just stood taller than an entire town. And the dog they called a mutt? He was now the most decorated non-human combatant in U.S. military history. Daniel rose, Rocky by his side, and the room rose with them. Veterans Day arrived 1 week later, crisp and bright beneath a cloudless sky. At Arlington, thousands stood in solemn silence as names echoed through the air. But this year, there was a new addition to the program, a final honor announced with both reverence and thunderous applause. Sergeant Daniel Carson walked to the podium, Rocky pacing at his heel, vest gleaming with ribbons and honors that sparkled under the morning sun. The Secretary of the Navy stepped forward. "Today we recognize not only a warrior, but a man who never asked for recognition, and a dog who never let his soldier fall." The crowd stood. Many saluted. A few wept. Daniel said few words. "I didn't carry a flag because I had to. I carried it because others couldn't. Rocky didn't save my life once. He saved it every day after." He stepped aside. Rocky barked once, sharp, clear, proud. After the ceremony, a group of young cadets gathered around them. They asked questions, took notes, listened closely as Daniel spoke. Not about war, but about kindness, resilience, and staying upright when the world tells you to kneel. Back in Fairwater, the Blue Water Grill had changed. A bronze plaque now hung above the booth by the window. Reserved in honor, Sergeant Daniel Carson and Sergeant Rocky, brothers in arms, never forgotten. Each Wednesday, veterans gathered there, not just to eat, but to connect, to mentor, to remember. And Daniel, he joined the Federal Commission, helped rewrite policy, trained other veterans to work with service dogs, traveled the country telling his story, not for sympathy, but for awareness. When Rocky passed peacefully 2 years later, the town mourned like they had lost a person. He was buried with full honors. His headstone read, "Sergeant Rocky, Bravo Unit, Defender, Guardian, Friend." Every November, Daniel visits that grave, and he whispers the same words every time. I stood because you did. And now, an entire nation does too.